Marek, welcome to the podcast. It's lovely to have you on the floor plan.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to get into, I've got so many questions today, obviously, about AI. This is the hot topic about the workplace and how it's transforming. But before we do that, I'd love to understand a little bit about how you got into this area, about your research and how you ended up, you're just up the road from me at QUT in Brisbane.
That's right. Oh, look, it's a long story, but I'll try to be short here. I spent half of my professional life in industry. I worked for Microsoft in China, for SAP, the enterprise software company in Australia, Singapore, Silicon Valley, always in R&D, research and development, working on new features of products and things that were coming out of those companies. And then the other half of my professional life, the current half, is an academic world. So at some stage, when I was in Silicon Valley, I decided, okay, I need a break from the sort of the hustle and bustle culture of Silicon Valley. And I moved to Australia, and I've been here for 10 years. Not that it's any slower than Silicon Valley, it's just different. I think I started teaching artificial intelligence more than 20 years ago, I think in
Wow.
2002 or so. So I've been in this space for a while. And I've always been really interested in that intersection of technology and business. I never wanted to be in just one camp, like never wanted to be a computer scientist or never wanted to be a management scholar. I always wanted to be, someone who's like, across those two fields. And so that's what I've been doing for many, many years. And so like I'm the go-to person if you want to try to understand the business impact of technologies. I don't always have answers. I have plenty of questions, but I love working with organizations on figuring out those answers. So I do a lot of commercial research.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm not in AI, but can very much relate to what you're saying. The reward of being an academic who does have that foot in that side of things with the research, but is also translating that and making a difference in industry, particularly in this area where there is so much change going on at the time. So quite a difference coming from Silicon Valley to beautiful sunny Queensland. And are you originally from the US?
No, I was born in Poland, grew up there. I was actually born during the communist times behind the Iron Curtain. So it was a fun time with the Soviet troops in the country and so on. Lots of stories about it as well.
Wow.
But at some stage, I got my first computer, learned to play with technology and so on. And there's again, another long story. We probably don't have time for that, Libby. But, it's a fun story how I got to Australia through all those other countries from communist Poland many years ago.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, we're going to link obviously your website and your fabulous book in the show notes. So perhaps readers can find out a little bit more about you there, listeners rather. Well, I'd love to dive straight into what we want to talk about today, which our listeners always have so many questions about. One of the things that you often talk about in terms of AI systems is the idea of them as digital minions. So tell us a little bit what you mean by that metaphor and what changes when we start thinking of algorithms as co-workers rather than just tools?
I remember that was many years ago on the Jeopardy, the show, when one of the participants lost against IBM Watson. I think he said, I, for one, welcome our future digital overlords. And I was listening to it and felt like, that's crazy. I've been in that space of AI, and those systems are far from being overlords, are far from being sort of those superior entities. Yes, in some very narrow areas that they're much better than humans, but overall they're not. And so I thought, what's the contrarian view here? And I thought, well, the opposite of a digital overlord is a digital minion. So, and then I thought about the movie Minions and those yellow creatures. And I realized that a lot of AI systems are like those yellow creatures. So, you give them a task, they're very excited to do it 24/7, fully available, full of energy, and they'll do what you tell them. But then, when you look away, something weird happens in their heads, and they start doing those crazy, wild things. And I thought it's a good metaphor for what artificial intelligence systems are. So that's kind of the message that I started to spread. And you did mention my book, which I launched a year ago, The Economy of Algorithms, AI, and the Rise of the Digital Minions. So I thought I'm going to put it in the subtitle to really, start spreading that way of thinking. But it's really about this sort of mindset that those AI systems are imperfect. They're more like digital minions than like digital overlords.
I think it's a really good point. And so on that, then what responsibility do you think we have as leaders towards the digital teammates and the humans alongside them? Because now we hear that we have managers who are managing entire teams of AI workers.
Yeah, it's it's a completely new paradigm, right? So most of the history of computers, electronic computers that we've always sort of treated them as those boxes that will always give us definitive answers and, always correct answers, because there were those sophisticated algorithms that would be much more precise than what a human would do, much faster as well, but, much more precise. And that's kind of how we grew up with computers. But the most recent systems, and that's especially generative artificial intelligence, all those chatbots, large language models and so on, they're not like those old school systems. The old school systems, the academics refer to them as deterministic systems.
Right.
Whatever you give them, exactly what the output is going to be, right? Those new systems, large language models, are so-called stochastic or probabilistic systems. So there's a level of uncertainty in terms of what you will receive based on the inputs, and it's very, very hard to predict what it is. That's unusual. So that's something that I don't think as a society we've sort of come to terms with just yet. We still like to think about computers as those like very reliable devices. They're not anymore if they're running systems like large language models, Gen AI systems. So back to your question, if you're now managing all those sort of workers, those teams of algorithmic workers, if those algorithmic workers are not your traditional old school deterministic algorithms, the way I describe them, which could be the case, but are more, those AI chatbot large language model type of agents, as we call them these days. You need to apply this sort of leadership or management approach where you always check, verify, look for hallucinations, look for mistakes, and so on. It's actually really, really hard to be a good manager of those types of systems. It's definitely not. Look, this is like, people think that if they deploy those systems, work is gonna get done faster. No, because if you apply all those checks that you need to apply, it might take exactly as long as it would take without those systems. It's just that the quality might get higher if you use those systems. So really, really different approaches to managing those systems, but I would highlight that ability to check the quality, the trustworthiness, the accuracy of the outputs of the systems is something that we're not that used to, and we still need to learn to work with those systems in those new ways.
I think that's really interesting because there is a lot of discussion and on both sides, or in the fear about replacement versus the augmenting human work. So from what you're seeing in organizations, does that story hold? Like, is it augmentation? Is it replacement? Is it both? Is it more likely one side than the other?
Yeah, so I can speak only for what I have seen, right? And just to kind of, predicate whatever I'm going to say, right? I'm not actively researching the sort of job replacement in economies and so on, but I do work a lot with organizations, large, small, that implement artificial intelligence. With those organizations that I have seen, I have not seen a single case where people would be let go of because of automation or artificial intelligence. I simply have not seen that. What I have seen was replacement of tasks and sort of activities that those people were doing. But in every single case, and my sample might be biased, and I'll explain in a second, in every single case that I have seen, those people whose tasks or activities were replaced by automation, those people would go up in the sort of the hierarchy or the chain in the organization. So they would sort of learn new skills, do something much more sophisticated than the sort of kind of simple tasks that they were doing before that got automated by a machine. The bias in my sample is that I work with organizations that kind of self-select to work with me. They reach out to me and say, hey, Marek, we're curious, we're exploring, we want to grow, and so on. So with those organizations, the CEOs, the managing directors, the directors general of those, I work with public sector as well, directors general of those organizations, they always sort of look at sort of expanding, growing, doing things better rather than doing the same thing just at a lower cost, right? I can imagine if you have, like, as a leader, if you have that mindset of, I don't want to grow my organization, I just want to keep doing the same thing, then probably this could lead to job replacement. But show me a leader who will admit to, wanting to stay the same and have no ambition, right? So that's,
Definitely.
that's my take.
Yeah, definitely. So, Marek, we talk a lot about knowledge management forever, that it's such an issue in organizations. We do it badly, no matter who is actually doing it.
Yeah.
So, as algorithms start actually making these decisions, who is going to capture the value? Is it the organization, the customer, the system? And how should we actually be thinking about this value creation and distribution in this augmented economy?
Yeah. So look, I don't know is my answer to this question, but I'm extremely curious about it, and I'm starting to see some interesting signals that in my research, with my research group, we want to explore a bit further. The interesting part is that we're starting to see signals that the value is being captured by individual employees quite often, because sort of the difference of the current wave of automation, or sort of the implementation of AI in organizations, is that it's the individual employees that get those chatbots, their agents, their sort of algorithmic partners to work with. And often it's those individual employees that figure out how to be more efficient, how to be more effective, have higher quality of the work with those agents. Often what happens is that, we're seeing that people spend less time on a task while delivering the same or even higher quality, but the employer doesn't know. So the employee is just like, I'm gonna do it faster and I'm gonna relax, right, for a
Yeah.
while.
Mhm.
This is like one sort of type of value being captured. In that relaxation time, I'm starting to see people taking additional jobs as well. This is like in some sectors, like software developers, for instance, if they get faster, they say like, I'm gonna get another job, contractors, consultants, and so on and so on. But that's something interesting. And I have this sort of, I like it. I like what I'm seeing because, for the last 50 years or so, we've seen the benefits of automation being captured by top layers of the organization. So basically the CEO and the C-suite, as well as shareholders, right? And now it's kind of like, all right, it's like, the table is turned, and now it's the employees that finally, because we couldn't, as economists, we couldn't explain why employees weren't sort of getting those benefits. Now we're seeing that kind of those benefits actually being there. You did ask about the system, about the customers. No, not seeing that yet.
Okay. Yeah, really, really interesting, and much more to come, I suspect, in this space.
Mm.
But as a business school academic myself, obviously very, very interested in business models, organizational design, and you've written about business model innovation in
Yeah.
our Industry 4.0. So
Yeah.
what have you learned about how leaders can design work so that we still have meaning and creativity in what we do? Because I think that's another big sort of question that people have around this.
So I've recently run a session with executives of some very, very large organizations in Poland, the largest banks in Poland, the largest institutions there. And we had we had a session about just that. What I've done is I applied Clayton Christensen's framework of jobs to be done, where the late Professor Clayton Christensen came up with this sort of concept that we hire products and services to do a particular job for us, and that's a job that arrives in our lives, that we hire those products or services to perform for us. It's kind of like, it seems weird to somebody who has heard it for the first time, but after a while it kind of lands. I hire a mattress every night because there's a job emerging in my life, which is, I'm tired and I need to be refreshed in the morning. So, I hire a mattress, right? And I sleep on the mattress. When you think about it like this, you could probably hire, a sofa, a hotel room, and so on. So, so that's the concept. Now, I applied the concept of jobs to be done to human jobs, right? So, you're a teacher. Why do people hire you? Turns out they don't hire you to write, letters to parents or maybe create tests and mark tests. They hire you, the parents hire you to inspire their children, to help them see, the exciting future in their lives and put them on the right direction. Which is when you realize that this is your real job, then it's not a problem that, task or test grading gets automated, because that gives you more time to do the real job, the one that you were hired for, which is, engage with kids, get them inspired, and so on. So there is the whole framework that I have developed. It's called Job Split Framework. You can look it up. It's on my newsletter, which has sort of like 4 areas, which areas you want to hand over to artificial intelligence, which tasks and so on, which ones you want to defend because, they want to, they're very crucial to your core job, which areas you want to use to amplify who you are. But also the 4th one is ask yourself, what are some jobs of the future, some tasks of the future for yourself that do not exist, but now become possible because of the changing system, right? Not just because of technology, but the entire system changing, right? So maybe, in future, you're also, inspiring at scale, thanks to AI and algorithms, right? Inspiring globally, whatever that would be. So, and obviously, it's hard to answer this question in just a couple of minutes, but that's the idea, right? Reimagine what your job is. It's not your job description. It's really what people hire you for, not signing documents, not checking documents, but, providing trust, providing inspiration, and so on and so on. And then think how you could use AI for yourself, not fight against it in this job.
Yeah, I think some really, really good points and takeaways on that. It's such an interesting topic. I could definitely talk about that one for a long time. Let's chat a little bit about governance, because that's obviously another big topic in this space. And I know this is quite a challenging question, but if you were to build an AI governance system for a big organization, are there non-negotiables? Do you think regulation will come fast enough? Will companies need to self-govern? Where are we sort of at in that space?
Yeah, look, regulation will always, by definition, be behind the progress, the technology. Like, if you think regulation, it is to regulate something, right? That something has to exist, that something has to occur. So regulation will always be behind, and all that organizations can do is sort of try to be as quick as possible if they believe that's important with that response. But also, and that takes me to sort of to my, I guess, my main point and my main negotiable. You need to prepare your organization to sort of to be responsible even without governance, right? Without sort of governance on paper, in rules, and so on. How do you do that? By working on we're talking about AI, right? So, AI literacy and AI fluency, or technological, to be broader, literacy, technological fluency. I think the biggest problem is often people just simply don't know that what they're doing might have some negative consequences, right? There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who have no idea that ChatGPT hallucinates still, right? There's a lot of people who have no idea that when they go to Google right now, that stuff on top of the search results, whatever they're called, search snippets, this is large language model generated and can, can include hallucinations, right? I had an argument with my wife about one of those a while back because like she sent me that and so like, this is the truth. And it's like, no, it's not, right? And it wasn't a big argument, but it was like a, interesting exchange. My point is, we need to work on this literacy fluency within organization, with every employee, so that they are equipped as well as we can equip them, right? It's never going to be perfect, but equipped with enough knowledge for them to make those responsible decisions by themselves. We don't need to be like a nanny organization who says like, don't do this, you are allowed to do that. You can also say like, hey, these are our values, this is what we care about, make your own decisions, right? And that's, that's like that level of almost like permissionless governance, right? Which is very, very important, but it does require literacy and fluency in those technologies.
Yes, and we're even seeing this in big, sophisticated organizations. This week, we've seen a big news story around Deloitte and a report they produced that was found to be done by AI and had a lot of inaccuracy, and that's obviously created a lot of issues. So, yes, that ability to think and check is very important, and it's surprising, that idea, isn't it? You think, well, I'm just lazy, I'm just going to do this. My workload's too high. I'm going to get AI to do this report for the client, and I'm not going to check it.
And that shows that that the kind of system of checks is not good enough. Deloitte a year before issued a list of recommendations for organizations, and they pretty much sort of breached those recommendations because they said like always check those outputs and so on. So yeah, it's it's a very interesting world that we have right now, and it's gonna get even more interesting, right? Organizations will have even more large language models to work with, even more agents and so on. It's going to get messy before it gets less messy.
Yeah, definitely. So on that, if we go 10 years is a long time ahead in the context of how we live nowadays, but 5-10 years, do you think that, what do you think will become more valuable in terms of human capability because of AI that will define what's successful work, what's successful leadership? Because that's a question I get asked almost every day, as I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, so look, we now live in a world of what economists would call zero marginal cost content, meaning it's free to generate more content, right? Just like in a non-economist language, right? It's so cheap, almost free to generate as much content as possible. But that content is all often just, pretends to be good quality, right? We're talking about large language models and the likes. In many cases, it's extremely helpful. In my team, we work full-time with large language models, right? We work with them all the time. When we work on strategies, when we work on new business model generation and so on, we employ them all the time. But we have those skills that we developed of working with those systems, the sort of keeping them in check, making sure that every single word, every single space, and and a comma is being checked in those outputs, because we don't treat them as time savers. We treat them as kind of brainstorm partners, our co-editors for documents and so on. It's not about saving time, it's about increasing quality. The skill that is required for that is critical thinking, and that ability to to engage even more with content, that even more than before, with content that you didn't create, that somebody else, something else created. It's a hard skill, and I think the challenge right now is, and sort of the research is still out there. We don't have definitive answers, but it seems like there are people who claim that the proliferation of chatbots and large language models is actually decreasing our abilities to think critically. So like if this is the case, then we have a problem, because we actually need more critical thinking now that we have those systems. But definitely, surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, this is like the skill that I believe we all need to develop over the next years. It's going to become more and more important.
Absolutely. Could not agree more.
Mm.
So last question I have for you, Marek, and I know it's a big one, is if you could redesign the whole economy of work from the ground up with AI as our partner, what would you keep and what would you potentially throw out?
It is a tricky one, right? And sort of my way of thinking about it is like if I were to redesign economy for the internet, right? What would I keep? What do I try to remove? Look, my sort of intuition is pulling me somewhere toward those like traditional governance models and large organizations, and but those legal models for large organizations. And I think the internet has shown us that we simply don't really need those large organizations, those like massive large organizations, that they cause more problems. Like, think about Google as a startup 25 years ago, right? I think they're
Right.
25 years ago this year, or no, a couple of years, maybe even older, roughly 25 years.
Yeah.
They were absolutely amazing, changed the economy and so on. These days, I would say like the moment they've grown, we're now talking about breaking them up, splitting. That's like, there's this like level of growth of an organization up beyond which it becomes unhealthy. And I think the internet has shown us that this sort of interconnectedness of the economy allows us to have many smaller players that are very well coordinated, and it works very, very well for the economy. I think this is going to be even more pronounced with AI. Just think about this week's announcements by OpenAI about this sort of new orchestration of applications, of services. So you now have large language models that can ask this application to do something, then give it to another one, and so on. In half a year, we'll take that concept and apply it to businesses, right? So we'll have those AI orchestrators of business networks that we'll start seeing. This means there'll be, even less need for large, gigantic organizations. Of course, there will be tycoons who will want to build empires, but this is, but that's not something that I would worry about.
Yeah. Well, that's a really, I think, lovely and optimistic note to end on today. And Marek, where can people find out more about you? Where's the best place to point them to?
I have a newsletter called The Economy of Algorithms. If you type it in Google, it should take you somewhere. Best is to either connect with me on LinkedIn. If you do, then I believe LinkedIn automatically starts to send you my newsletter. But if not, my newsletter is on Substack as well, Marek Kowal. So the first letters of my surname, Marek, my first name, and Kowal, my first letters of my surname, .substack.com. The Economy of Algorithms. I recently started recording a podcast every week as well, in which I pretty much just read and comment on my weekly newsletters. So like a bit of an unusual type of a podcast for those people who wrote to me and said, Marek, this is great content, but I would prefer to listen to you rather than read you. So that's what I'm doing. The podcast is also called The Economy of Algorithms, and it is on your favorite podcast platform. So that's how you find me, The Economy of Algorithms.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today, Marek. I know you're presenting at South by Southwest next week, as am I, and I'm hoping to catch your session while I'm there.
That's awesome. Libby, great chatting with you, and see you at South by.